Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too.
Welcome in. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is going to be very helpful for you that you're going to be able to implement today. And a lot of times when we think of weight loss, when we think of fitness, when we think of long-term improvements in our health, it is a long game, right? And it can get really frustrating when we're told to trust the process and we believe that, but we want to see some immediate changes, right? It's like if you have an injury and you're going to physical therapy, right? You want to start seeing some sort of progress, some change, something to let you know like, hey, I'm on the right track, right? And weight loss, a lot of times when you take a long-term approach, when you take a slow approach, it can be very frustrating because you're not seeing the results immediately, and sometimes you're not seeing results at all, especially if you're only using one form of measurement. And so if you're using something like the scale may not change much right away. For some people, if you have a lot of weight to lose, then yes, you're going to see changes on the scale. But if you're somebody who is kind of in that intermediate range, or somebody who has lost weight in the past and you're just trying to lose a little bit more, then the scale's not going to change much. And so what you can do then is, one, you just have to find other ways to measure too. One, you can measure your sleep, right? That's kind of subjective, right? Unless you're actually tracking it, how much you're sleeping. My Apple Watch tells me my deep sleep, all that. I don't know how accurate it is, but it is a tool, right? You can do tape measurements. This is one of my favorite ways to track progress. I know this past summer I did kind of like a 8-week mini cut, and I wasn't losing much weight, but I was losing inches on my waist. So which told me, one, my measurements in the gym, I was still increasing weight or staying relatively the same, but the scale wasn't going down, but the weight measure or the waist measurements were going down. So that told me I was losing fat, right? So if I hadn't been using the tape measure to track my waist measurement, then I wouldn't have had known I've been making progress at all. So that's a couple ways you can just kind of check things. The one I kind of touched upon there is your strength training, right? If you're lifting weights in the gym and you are either maintaining what you currently lift or getting stronger, the scale's going down, then we can safely assume that you're losing fat, right? If you've lost 10 pounds, but you've also gotten weaker in the gym, then we can probably assume that some of that weight you've lost is muscle going along with some of that fat, right? Without doing proper testing, it's hard to tell, but that's a pretty good gauge there. Now, if you were in, you were teaching your son to read, you're teaching your daughter to read, you're teaching them how to tie their shoes, and they went weeks and weeks and weeks without seeing any progress, they're going to get frustrated. And so that's what I want to help you avoid when it comes to weight loss. And so one thing that can be very helpful is to be super accurate, probably almost to the point where you feel like you're doing too much. A lot of times when you see people talk about they're tracking their food, it gets counted as excessive, right? It's too much. You're obsessed with food. You have a poor relationship with food. Now, that could be true in some cases, but if we were to kind of flip that, and now we're talking about money, we're trying to get out of debt, we're budgeting our money, we're tracking our finances, we're tracking every dollar we spend, you wouldn't call those people obsessive, you would call them dedicated, right? You would call them, they're ready to make a change. They're getting out of the situation. They see a path and they're determined to get there, right? But when it comes to food, people get kind of weird about that, right? When people start tracking their calories, all of a sudden, people are looked at as, health nuts, or they're obsessive, or they have a poor relationship with food. None of these are the case, right? There are people who do have they do have obsessive tendencies. There are people who do have poor relationships with food, but just because you track calories doesn't mean that's going to be the case. And it does not mean that it's going to lead to that either, right? Tracking is one of the best ways to make sure you have an accurate picture of what's going on. I've been tracking my own calories, my own food for years. I am still not very good at eyeballing, what 6 ounces of chicken breast looks like, right? Like I can do a pretty good job at saying, hey, this is similar to what I ate yesterday, but I'm not very good at it. And let me give you an example here. This doesn't have to do with tracking food, but so my wife she owns her own cookie baking business, right? Kind of ironic, right? I tell people, hey, maybe we should lay off the cookies, and she's providing them, right? It's a pyramid scheme, but anyway, I digress. But so she is a really great baker, and so she makes all sorts of different cookies. And she was gone one evening, and I thought, hey, that'd be kind of fun to kind of learn, bake some cookies for the kids, and then when she gets home, surprise her, right? So I found a YouTube video online. I spent 30 minutes watching it. It was a 5-minute video. I watched it over and over and over again to make sure I knew what I was doing. And then I baked the cookies, and they turned out pretty good. What I didn't know was that the cookie scoop was bigger than the one they were using, so I didn't cook them long enough. Anyway, cookies tasted fine, and I was like, hey, that was kind of fun. So I did it another time. And the second time, the first time I followed the instructions to a T, right? It said that it's going to be more accurate using grams rather than like cups. And so I was like, okay, cool. I can measure in grams. I got the food scale out, did all that. The second time, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to eyeball this here. I just used the cup. I didn't want to get the food scale out, even though I had it out. I just didn't use it, right? And so when the cookies came out, they were a little bigger. They were a little harder. I used too much flour, and they didn't taste nearly as good. The next day, they were like rock hard cookies. And so what the difference was is I used too much flour because I eyeballed it. I didn't measure it. And this happens all the time when people are trying to lose weight, when they're trying to track their calories. And so I teach my clients, this is something I teach personally. I don't do it as much as I used to, especially for beginners, but I use something called hand portion sizes. And so, for instance, you can use the palm of your hand as a serving. It's about 20 to 25 grams of protein. So think of like, your chicken, your beef, your turkey, things like that. A palm portion size of, a palm of meat is about 20 to 25 grams of protein. Now, it's not accurate. It's not 100% accurate, but it's a good tool. And for most people, this can be very helpful, right? And so let's say you need 6 palms of protein a day, but then you get into what if it's packaged this, and then we can have a discussion of, the nutrition continuum, what's going to be best for you, what's going to be more nutritious, what's going to be less nutritious. But for most people, it can be a very good starting point, right? It can be a tool to help track their food without having to get an app such as MyFitnessPal or get a food scale or do things like that. But when you have, you're trying to lose maybe, just 20 pounds, if you have like 100 pounds to lose, hand portion sizes are great, right? Because you don't have to be as accurate. You're going to have a lot more wiggle room. But once you get closer to your goal, it becomes much easier to accidentally eat in maintenance, right? That's where things like condiments come into play. And so you think of like, your ketchup, your mayonnaise, all these things. A lot of times people forget to track these. They will track the burger they ate, they'll track the bun they ate, maybe the cheese that they put on it, but they forget to add the ketchup, the mustard, the mayonnaise, the tomatoes, all those things. Now, some of those things don't have a lot of calories, but they still do have calories. And if you're in a 400 calorie deficit, and all of a sudden you're eating these foods throughout the day and you're not tracking them accurately, you can accidentally be at maintenance a lot of the time. And so just doing something as simple as weighing your food. And like I said, it doesn't have to be forever, but I encourage all my clients for at least 30 days to track their food accurately. If you can track your food accurately for 30 days, you are going to get a better education in nutrition than most people will ever have, because you're going to see what's actually going on, right? And tracking my food for me personally changed my life, right? I was always active growing up. I was always in sports, and it was very easy for me to stay relatively lean. I started lifting weights when I got older and I got strong and I got more muscular. And then I stopped being as active, and all of a sudden the weight starts piling on, right? And I have no idea. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I start using my fitness pal. All of a sudden I go for a workout and it says, hey, I have 400 extra calories today. And so what did I do? I ate those extra calories, right? Now, a quick tip, if you are using an app and it gives you calories back, just delete those. Just forget those are there. A lot of these apps will overestimate how many calories you're burning. And so if your calorie target is 2,100 for the day, eat 2,100 calories. If you do a workout, you go for a run or something, all of a sudden it says you have 2,700 calories, just ignore that. Delete that in the settings if you can, and just eat the calorie goal. A lot of those calories are factored in to these equations already of what you're burning. And so don't eat back the calories. But that's something I didn't know when I first started. So I was so frustrated, right? Because I was putting in the work. I was at the time working out like 5-6 days a week. I was walking. There were days I was walking like 20. I think my goal was always like 10,000. But there were days where I would get 20, 30,000 steps. But I wasn't losing weight because I kept eating back all these calories. I was eating way more than I needed to be, and I had no idea, right? And then I started tracking things, and it's like, obviously it wasn't effortless. I still had to put in the work, but it made things so much easier because yes, I was getting enough protein in. Yes, I was eating more nutritious foods, but the one thing that was missing is I wasn't tracking accurately. I was eating too much. I was eating more than I thought I needed to be. And so I wasn't able to lose weight. And then once I fixed this, it's so much easier. And this happens all the time, right? Where we think we can eyeball things. We go to family dinners. We think we can, just guesstimate how much protein's in something. And the truth is people are not very good at it. And so what you can do to make weight loss so much easier is just to download MyFitnessPal. It's free. It's free. You can use this scanner in there. There's other apps as well. I just use MyFitnessPal because it's free. And it's just what I'm used to. And so buy yourself a food scale. You can get them for probably 20, 25 bucks at your local grocery store. Spend the next month just weighing your food and putting it in a tracker and understanding how much you're actually eating. Because once you have a clear picture of what's actually going on, then you can make adjustments, right? If you're trying to budget your money, if you're trying to save money, but you have no idea how much you're spending, you have no idea how much money's coming in, where it's all going, then it makes it much harder to save. It makes it much more difficult to pay off debt. And so download MyFitnessPal, buy yourself a food scale, and start tracking the foods. And the great thing is the barcodes are on almost every single food you eat. And so you can just scan them. They're already in there. It has a huge database. And just try for the next 30 days, try for the next month to track your food, see what's actually going on. And I promise you, you're going to be happy with the results.
That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.